everybody. Welcome to another session in Awaken and Unleash Your Inner Power. It's a 7-day retreat to help you awaken your magic and get you on your path to awakening. Today, I am interviewing Naomi Aldort. She is the best-selling author of the book, Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. She was published in 20 languages, and she is also very well known internationally for advice columns, interviews, and articles that are published all over the world. Hello, and welcome to our interview. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. What an important subject for us to talk about: how to raise emotionally resilient children from birth until adulthood. Can you begin speaking a little bit about that process?
Well, the process is like the title of my book, Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. So we get a chance, we think our parents raised us, but really the main part of the job is us. And when we have a child, then we get to do it because we see the child is our mirror. And when I work with parents in private sessions on Zoom, some of the session may be me just giving advice what to do, but a lot of the session is what we realize is that no matter how well you know what to do, you can't do it if the emotional capacity is tied from your own childhood and concepts learned over the years and blocked in a way so that you are being triggered in a variety of ways rather than be present to how the birth goes, who the baby is, who the child, teenagers, and adults. So a lot of the work that I do with parents in workshops, in private sessions, on Zoom and in person, is doing the work on oneself to become the person who can do all the nice instructions. Because the instructions are useless if the person in there just is too triggered and cannot do them. And a lot of parents, when they call me, they say, Naomi, I read your book. I agree with all the ideas. I love what you teach. I want to do this. And then in the moment my child has a tantrum or my siblings hurt each other, I just lose it. I just can't follow those instructions because some other monster within me wakes up and goes to war or to defend or to, just falls apart and is unable to do it. And that's why that's the part we work on a lot for most people.
Wonderfully said. I agree with you in that we need to look inside of us first, and what better way to do that in our relationships? Even more strongly will that occur in our own offspring. They are the deepest, most clearest reflections that we're ever going to look at. The eyes of our own children is the eyes that we see ourselves in. Right. So what a beautiful gift that we have an opportunity to raise a human consciously, while also having that feedback loop of, oh, there's something within me that I still need to look at. And how amazing is it that I can do both at the same time?
Well, it's not exactly at the same time. It's the only time. And it's the only thing to do because you literally give birth to your guru, to your spiritual teacher. You will never be the same person once that baby comes out. The illusions, even while being pregnant, are amazing. I'm always smiling with love and understanding when pregnant women tell me their plans, and then it all falls apart. Those plans usually is not what happens when this person actually shows up and reality is in their face.
Do you believe that children pick their parents on a spiritual level?
No, I have no way of seeing such a thing. I have no way of knowing of any existence outside my limited senses. So I don't go to those places because I can't know.
I understand. I'm curious to know also what your thoughts are on what conscious birthing is? And how does it look like from the mother's perspective the minute she hears news of the pregnancy? How can she begin to consciously have a child?
And let's assume this is a wanted pregnancy, otherwise it's a whole other subject. Okay, so in the context of a wanted pregnancy, it's again raising yourself, because some mothers start and realize they're afraid of giving birth, for example. So that's what they need to work on, because by the time they give birth, they need to surrender. Birth is a preparation for parenting. Parenting is surrender. Not surrender as, I don't mean being a doormat that the child steps all over, not at all. I'm not into permissive parenting or anything like that. But surrendering to the process, surrendering to who the child is so they can be who they are, not who we shape them to be. And it starts with birth, so they will birth their way, a natural way. So when pregnant, to be, I would say the answer to your question is be curious, welcoming, and do your best to be still and to create a connection with this being. Like, who are they? Because the beauty of pregnancy that the men don't get to do is they're in us. And actually their blood plasma exchanged with ours. We're getting some code from their body in ourselves, physiologically and spiritually in that way. So I think being in tune with that, with who the baby is, and working on oneself to first not be afraid of giving birth, surrendering to giving birth. So the birth is preparation for parenting, because if you don't surrender, you end up with C-section. If you don't surrender, you have more pain and it takes longer. My own first birth took me a while to surrender. I was fighting it, you know, and it's natural the first time to like hold back, try to avoid the pain, but you have to welcome the pain, and you have to plan your birth while knowing that you have no idea what will happen, and to avoid intervention where you have a date for your, not do C-section, not do planned timing, and not be afraid of going way over the due date. Babies come on time, on their time. So I'm sure there are some very extreme situations that intervention is needed, but for most birth, you don't need intervention. You don't have to break the water. You don't have to push anything or take anything to make it come faster, but you have to accept whenever it comes and however it comes. And, for me, hospital is the place that it's the hardest to do, because there's so much intervention and lights and strangers and having to be on the back, which slows down giving birth, so that they can monitor more easily. They need you on your back for their convenience, so they can attach you to the computer so they can see what's happening. While when you give birth at home, you get a midwife who knows to put her ear on your belly or to look in your eyes and knows what's happening. With my last baby, for example, when I called my midwife and said that I'm in labor, she told me later that she didn't think she would make it on time for the birth, because on the phone I was 8 centimeters. She could tell that by my voice. I knew they can tell it by the eyes, but when she told me that she knew by the voice, and she was right, she did make it, but by just a few minutes.
Wow.
Barely. So being fearless, not buying all the fear propaganda of the medical profession, of all the bad things that can happen, taking care of yourself, of course, diet-wise. Brain development depends on cholesterol and proteins, so that's not the time to be vegan as a side. But I know some people, I gave birth to my first one as a vegan, but I regretted that, and I learned that the baby and the development of a child actually needs a lot of cholesterol and creatine and a lot of good things that cannot be supplied or assimilated. without the animal food. So being aware of these things, exercising, listening to music, being present, and then going into the birth with a sense of curiosity, welcoming, and surrender. In the way you're in the presence of God, in the presence of spirit, in this presence of what we have no words for when you give birth, right? You know, you are a vessel. And life is happening. And that's true everyday life for everybody, men and women. We're always just a vessel that we have no control over. We don't choose the color of our eyes. We don't digest the food. It digests by itself. It also thinks by itself. It does all these things. And we are, you know, we need to let it go through us or we become stuck. So it's the same with birthing. The more you let it go, the easier the birth. And for me, it was I had 3 births and each one was easier. It's also typically easier because your body is more ready. But with my 3rd one, I totally let go. I totally let whatever happens. And it was unbelievably miraculous and the easiest birth. But again, people know that the births do get easier anyway, physically. But the spiritual aspect, you know, you can get even to the first birth with that maturity of complete letting go and seeing the pain as rushes rather than as pain, something to welcome. It's strong, it's coming, you know, the baby's coming out. And finding ways to do it in the most natural way, whether it's home or birthing center. And even then, choosing a midwife who is not going to intervene and tell you when to breathe and when to stop. You know, unless there is a need that is very specific. Like I told my midwife, you know, if I'm going to tear, tell me to slow down because you push too fast and you tear and you don't need to. So I'm a tiny person and I gave birth to a 9-pounder without a single tear. And first one, I tore a little bit and that was only 6'10". the poundage was a much smaller baby. So really, it has nothing to do with the size. Again, the medical professional will tell you the baby is too big and all that kind of stuff. And you have to, when you surrender, the birth happens smoothly. And when you surrender, parenting happens smoothly too. I don't mean there's never struggle, but you have to surrender to the struggle as well and let go of control. And timing, you know, it's like when I have to give birth, how long it's taking. It's taking what it's taking. You be that baby. My midwife said to me in the second one, because the first one took 28 hours, was really long, and I resisted and was high, and you know, okay. Then my second one, I came in with the spirit of I'm going to push it fast, and yet the baby was sliding back in. It was coming, almost crowning and sliding back in, and my midwife was encouraging me to push, which was wrong. But my friend midwife, who was present but had no permission to instruct me in any way, she told me, she tried to sneak in and said, the baby is warming, you're opening up so gently by going in and out. You know, so that's surrender. That's instead of thinking, oh no, it's going back in and it's not coming out, to think, it's really warming up the passage. It's doing what it needs to do in order to not tear and in order to come out smoothly and peacefully.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Yeah. So I can speak about birth alone for hours, but we have children and families and marriages and sleep and tantrums, and there's so much to talk about.
There is so much to talk about. And I even think that, you know, this could have been like a 2-part interview series. I agree in that being a mother, choosing to be a mother, or even being divinely orchestrated to be a mother, whether that is chosen or not, is the biggest spiritual assignment that you will ever have. And your practice of surrender happens immediately the moment you figure out and find out that you have a life growing within your womb space, which is the most sacred, holy space in a woman's body besides the heart. it's this cavity of creation, this primordial space where we create from as women when we're not pregnant.
Mhm.
And when we understand that there is now cells growing, there's now this it's almost like this poetry that's being created in you, is the moment you have to step out from your own way and surrender to something greater. And that's even the way that the fetus will develop and grow has its own life and pulse to it. And I also would like to include to the audience that your connection to your body is so important. How you listen to your heartbeat, you listen to the way that even the baby can try to speak to you. The mind body soul connection becomes so potent, and your electromagnetic field can really increase as a result. So you become magnetic. Why? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Why do people say when women are pregnant, you're glowing?
Because they are. but why is physiological, mental? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a subject I'm fluent about. I never
Mm-hmm.
thought about it.
I think it's because there's this beautiful pulsation of life that's happening, and a shift into a whole spiritual dimension.
Yeah, but that's a thought. You see, my way of working with parents and with people and how I empower people is to learn to distinguish thinking from reality. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what we create and feel, so those are all nice thoughts, but they're not gravity, they're not tangible, they're not a baby coming out of the womb and
Right.
baby in the womb. Those things are, because of being physical, they're they're just is. And
Mm-hmm.
what is where the power is and where we can know truth. So we can have all kinds of nice theories and loving ideas, which is lovely and and feels good and all of that, but those are thoughts and
And we need to connect it to the reality of what's happening.
reality. The most powerful thing to do is to connect to reality. See with your own eyes, not with the book you read, even if it's my book.
Yes.
Notice your child and learn who they are with your own eyes, with your own senses, not with the pain from your childhood, which is why there is so much work on the self.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, we can have beautiful thoughts too, and they feel good, but even beautiful thoughts can get in the way of noticing reality. So one of my sons, he recently uses this, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, not with what you read in the media
Yeah.
or in a book or a friend told you or whatever. See really what's going on. And, we can go philosophically deeper because we don't know that we see reality. We're still seeing through our own brain and our own glass colors and emotions and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
at least try to peel it, which is I teach a process. I use the work of Byron Katie. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I have heard of her work before. I had a friend who
Yeah.
hypnobirthing mention this to me.
Yeah, so I use a lot of that with parents as needed. There are sessions where we don't do that, but there's a lot of sessions, and when people come for a family intensive in my house or in workshops that we have enough hours, then we work on looking at the thoughts that get in the way of connecting with the child and seeing with our eyes and with our senses and with our heart who the child is and what's going on for them. So a parent may say, well, my child isn't listening to me. He's not listening to me. Like I have this story from a client that he put his two older children to bed, and the 6 years old was painting in the basement, doing art, and had to get up in the morning for school. So the father was getting impatient and saying to him, come on, you need to stop painting now and come to bed. Your sisters are already in bed and, you need to do it. And the child wanted to finish. And the child was saying he should listen to me. And I said, well, I guess not, because he isn't. That's how I know. Your child is God speaking to you. That's how you know what's true. Because the truth is, he's not. He's painting, he's connecting him, he's totally in it as a little artist. And, so he'll be tired in school tomorrow. That's a lot less important than whatever is going on for him, that he's so absorbed that he doesn't listen to you. And that actually you are not listening to him, as in notice where he is and how you need to serve him is to say, I see your painting. We're already in bed. When you're ready, call me and I'll help you get ready for bed.
I love that.
But he didn't do that. And I want to tell you the rest of the story in brief, so that you see when you do it wrong, what happens. And then say, oh, our child is so tantrumish and disobedient. The father got angry and went and picked him up forcefully and put him in the bathroom. And the child didn't come out of the bathroom ready for bed. The father is reading books to the two sisters in bed, in the family bed. They slept together. And the child isn't coming, the door is closed. And finally, the father gets up and starts opening the door, and he sees the child laying on the floor singing. So I called that story, I wrote an article about it in one of the magazines, I don't remember which, singing on the bathroom floor. So the father asks me, okay, so let's say I did it wrong initially. What do I do now? The child is still not getting ready for bed. And I said, wow, what do you see? Because in reality, he got angry again, and it ended up with the child crying, and it took another whole hour to go to sleep, right? But once he did the work on himself and on where he was triggered and his reaction and his anxiety about, the child getting enough sleep, which caused him to get even less sleep. Then when I asked him again after we did the whole process, he said, oh, I could have joined him singing. And I said, or you could have closed the door respectfully and let him finish the process. He spared you time. You won't have to sing him to bed. And you won't have to heal him from the trauma of you taking him forcefully away from his art project.
Yes.
He is healing himself. He is singing his neurological structure down to relax, to be able to go to bed. He's doing therapy. You can be very grateful about this child doing therapy. So again, you notice it's all about surrender and forgiveness, because the father had to forgive himself for doing it all wrong. And when I work with parents, I always say, you did the best you can in the moment. This is not a blame. This is not like, accuse yourself of being bad and start feeling bad. No, you do the best you can with what you know and with what your emotional capacity. And then you learn something because you have the courage to call somebody like Naomi Aldort and to read some books and to learn and to say, what could I do better? Why am I triggered like this? Why am I trying to control my child and end up getting into crying and war and tantrums? So I also worked with him on forgiving himself. I mean, this guy was with me enough time that he could forgive very fast. So that wasn't a long process. But for some people it is, because they would say, oh, when I read Naomi's book, I feel guilty. And I said, there's nothing to feel guilty. You did the best you can. But if you say, I feel guilty, then you close the book. And then you don't learn.
And then you don't learn. And then there's shame that builds
up. And then you stay. Exactly. So when you're willing to change, then maybe you have regret on what you did wrong. And even that, forgiveness takes care of it. It's like in the moment, you look back, did you do the best you could at that moment? Yes, you did. The proof is that's what you did. That's the capacity of the human being that you had in that moment. And then the next time you do it better and better and better, and you catch yourself and you realize, oh, my thinking is telling me to oppose my child right now, but now I remember the singing on the bathroom floor that happened to my child then, or to someone else's child, and you heard the story online. And okay, maybe I can look at why am I reacting? Why am I wanting to rush it? What's going on? So it comes back to my child should listen to me. No, he shouldn't. It's not true. He should listen to himself. We want them to be self-confident and rooted in themselves. Because the powerful, emotionally resilient person is one rooted in themselves, not a yo-yo flipped by the wind like a leaf in the wind based on what other people want of them, expect of them, or tell them. Strength is knowing that the answer is in here. That doesn't mean you never learn anything from someone else, but you learn from them and then you check with this. And it's either yes or no. It's always yes to me, to what's right for me. If somebody tells me a certain thing that isn't good for me, then it's yes to me by saying no to the idea. Or maybe part of the idea is like, perfect, I didn't see that. Thank you. I can always say thank you to whatever advice someone gives me, even if it's off the wall or blame or criticism. So if I don't seek approval, I have no problem being with people, and I'm never offended, because if they see something that I don't see, I'm grateful because I didn't see it and they see it, so I have something to learn. And if it absolutely is not true, which by the way is not possible, if there's one human being on earth that sees in you or in me or someone something, then there is some truth to it. They're seeing something. They're also projecting themselves, but they're succeeding to find something in me that would do the projection. So it may be 0.1% true, but I want to find that 1 or 0.1% and get value out of it, even if sometimes a tiny thing is a huge value too.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the singing on the bathroom floor, because children are like demigods. They're little gods who are unadulterated. Their ego hasn't formally developed so far. And it's an invitation to the parents. They're inviting the parents, come and play. Remember your godlike nature as well. And I love that you mentioned the dad could have just sat on the bathroom floor with the baby and sang with him and joined him and mirrored him in that play.
Yes, and that's what the dad first thought was, and I actually didn't think that was the best idea, because children in those kind of moments of isolation and connection, sacred moment, being with themselves, with the spirit, and singing and therapy, the dad joining it can actually interrupt that and make it be about the dad and the together and and the child is doing a phenomenal healing work on their own, and in a way it's sacred. Close the door and leave. Reverence. Rather than put, because the dad's idea to join the child is a little bit of an ego. I'll do something, I'll join him, I'll show him it's like the child is there alone singing. Unbelievable. I wouldn't do anything to interrupt, and it's good he did only a crack in the door. So I'd say you do a crack, the child didn't stop, didn't see you, close it silently and go away.
So you've heard of adults who are bashful of their gifts, or they're not confident in some of their skills. Do you think that that's a consequence when children haven't had the freedom to really be who they are, and then they learn later on in their adulthood that they have to almost regress back into the childlike state and live from there to heal temporarily?
Well, I would say when I do therapy unofficially, when I do the work with parents, sometimes, and I don't insist on it, they have to go back to the past to see where something came from and to see that it isn't true. Like my mother didn't love me, and they do a process for an hour and a half with me, and they sob and realize their mother loved them. But there were all this incident where the mother was not as skillful and gave messages that felt to the child like no love. She loved, maybe she loved through the ego too much. I'm not saying that it was perfect, but that the child as an adult can see from distance the devotion. I had a woman who did this kind of work in front of a group in a 3 days advanced workshop that I did in Prague, Czech Republic. And I remember this woman was sure and gave all these examples that her mother didn't love her, didn't care for her. And then we started asking questions. Did she make bed for you? Did she do your laundry? Did she make food for you? And on and on and on. And the woman started crying because she realized, she came more, and she always made me a birthday party, and she always, did this and she did that, and she surprised me with that, and she got me the clothes that I like. And all of a sudden, the flood of all the stuff, the mother, who, she must have done some things that were not kind and not loving from the point of view of the child, and that if she took lessons with me, could have done better. But it doesn't mean she didn't love. And when you find all those loving things that were done that this mother didn't realize when she was a child, because it's transparent. Of course, my mother does my laundry, and I get up in the morning and there's breakfast on the table.
Right,
and
it's just a given.
Bless me, and
to happen.
It's like you don't ask this question. So when I helped her ask these questions and start digging into the giant well of all the zillions of things her mother did for her. I mean, we don't just have a roommate and serve them hand and foot because we don't love them. And all of a sudden she realized that. So people realize that. I have a client in Australia who didn't talk to her mother for years, really wrote her off. And her mother was actually violent when she was a child. But she regretted those things at this, as adult, but the daughter couldn't forgive her. And after working with me, not only she forgave her, but she moved from Australia to New Zealand, or she went for a long visit and reconnected with her mother. And that helped her as a parent too. I mean, she's not the only one. I have a couple of stories of this kind, actually, in Australia, coincidentally, but also in Europe, in the United States. There are stories. I had a family here where, for a family intensive, where the mother also, she didn't talk to her father for years and years and years. And while being here, she realized what she was missing, and she got on the phone here on the porch. She talked to him for 3 hours on the phone, first time in years, sobbing all through it and reconnecting, and because she realized that he loved her. And she realized that she doesn't need his love. And that's even a bigger realization, that we don't need anybody's love but our own. So she was relieved already before calling him, because she already didn't need him. Because the work she has done with me here, with herself, liberated her from this attachment to needing someone else to be any certain way for her to feel fulfilled, because that's a dependency on someone else. And the way I teach, no matter what, nothing is dependent on another. That's why being triggered all the time, the current trigger warning and all that, it's all dependency on others and changing others so they won't hurt us, instead of being resilient and taking care of oneself to not hurt ourselves, but with what we hear. Yes. And I'm not saying it's all right to speak in insulting way. That's not the point. But the point is, one doesn't have to be insulted.
Yes.
And one can take care of oneself. Maybe not.
We don't have to personalize what's being said. And that's a way we can take our power back right there. You just said it.
Exactly.
And have our own autonomy.
And you forgive the other person because they're doing it unconsciously too. They think it looks like they're doing consciously and intending, but no, we don't make who we are and how we are raised, and all the automated behaviors that put into us over the years. There's a lot of compassion when you see somebody. If somebody is abusive toward me, I feel huge compassion toward them. Like, in how much pain do they have to be to talk like this. If your 4 years old comes to you and says, I hate you, mom. Oh my God, he must be in so much pain.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you hate me. Tell me more.
Yeah.
What is
Let
the thing
me
you
be
hate the
curious.
most? What do you hate the most? Tell me. I want to learn. Because I love you so much, and I want this to be clear between us. So
Mhm.
so you get interested,
Mhm.
rather than say we don't talk like that to mother, which now he's feeling even worse,
Right.
going deeper into shame, into feeling I'm not all right and not being able to express feelings. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, so somebody is insulting me. What is insulting? Unless I insult myself with what they say
Mhm.
by taking it
And
personally.
believing it.
Yeah, well, and sometimes the problem is that we should believe it. Take
Yes.
it in and say thank you, because there's 1% of it that could be useful, like I said before. And sometimes none. If somebody told me, you're smoking all day long and it stinks in the neighbor's house, well, I never smoke. So, I still would say thank you, and I'll look into that. I don't have a memory of myself of smoking. I wonder if I walk in my sleep and have a different personality who smokes.
Right. You'll self-examine through that
Yeah.
feedback.
And I would tell them, if they were neighbors, when the smoke comes, can you knock on my door and come over? And even it's in the middle of the night, so that I can catch it too, because I don't know where it is.
Mhm.
I haven't experienced myself smoking. So I'm giving you the most extreme, not true kind of accusation. And you still don't have to be defensive and say no,
Mhm.
because that's what
This
kills relationship.
non-defensiveness, how we can incorporate, and you talked about non-duality as well,
Yes.
which I loved in parenting relationships. Can you speak a little bit about that too?
Well, look, we live in a world of duality. We have no choice. Society operates on duality, maybe in some countries and societies less than others. But basically, the child is undual.
Mhm.
He doesn't see somebody calls them stupid and they're not hurt. They don't have a concept that that's bad, not at age 2, or, it's like they laugh.
Mhm. It's just
And I've succeeded with my children. They still laugh if you tell them something they did really stupid. They still laugh. So I find that can stay. So you want to nurture that non-duality they're born with, but
Mhm.
you're nurturing it in the face of humanity that's the most dual it ever been. Everything is categorized: insulting, not insulting, kind, not kind, justice, not justice, right, wrong, healthy, not healthy. So we live with that. We're not going to be without it, but we can help a child see things without those glasses that are so painful and limiting, because duality causes pain.
Mhm.
Now somebody speaks to me and they're evil, they're bad, when I could just see that they're in pain, and that's their expression, and I don't have to take it as bad or good. It's just what it is. And nature teaches us that. Look, human beings, uh, the lens of duality does things in justice and not justice and goes to war for it. So, an airplane goes into buildings and kills 3,000 people, and we're still in war on all the terrorism, and, 20 years later. And then 3 years after that happened, or 2 years, there was a tsunami that killed 130,000 people. And it goes out of the news quite fast and only brings on response, loving response, help, dealing with the dead, consoling the alive who lost loved ones, housing, food, international help,
Mhm.
right? And we don't go to war against the tsunami and against the ocean and against the wind, because it's nature, right? So if we looked at human beings as nature, then another child pushes my child in the playground and my child cries, is a tsunami. I teach it's nature phenomena. That child might have been very frustrated and in pain, or maybe his parents are
Yeah.
violent with him or her, right? So I can come to my child and teach them compassion the eye of compassion rather than the eye of blame and justice.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, that child must be confused by something. And I brush the sand off of him, and I try to help the other child in a compassionate way. Can I help you? It seems like, you need to do some pushing. Would you like to push me? Or, if it
We
depends.
accept the child for exactly who they are, exactly how they're feeling, which is the first step to parenting resilient, emotionally intelligent adults as
Yes.
well.
Yes, accepting reality and responding to it rather than reacting. I always used to, I like to put these two words next to each other. To respond, my child falls and they come to me crying. I respond, I give them a hug.
Mm-hmm.
To react is to get angry that they shouldn't have been on that trail with the tricycle, and who gave them the tricycle? It's too big for him, or who is the other friend who pushed him? Yeah. So no courthouse. I have an article about, turning the house into love house, not courthouse. It's one of famous phrases. So, a child falls, or a child is hurt by another child, or a child comes to me. I remember a bunch of children, friends, and my children play in the playroom. And one child comes out and says they won't play with me. They told me to leave. I don't know what she did. She wasn't my child. She was the guest. And something similar happened to a couple of clients, actually. And I usually tell the story about this other one. But anyway, this girl says that they won't play with me. And, the tendency is to go fix for justice sake, go back in with her. Everybody should be inclusive, and what's happening, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. I just said to the girl, what would you like to do instead? Giving her the message of respond to reality. Reality is you're by yourself now. Would you like me to call your mom and she can pick you up? Would you like to be with me? I'll read to you, or we can play together. Would you like to help me? I'm making lunch for everybody in the kitchen. Would you like to sit here and draw while I make the lunch? A lot of possibilities. And I gave her the message this way. If I saw that she was very upset, in my case, she wasn't, I would have said, I can see that you're very disappointed. You really wanted to play. So I would validate, ask her, do you want to tell me more about what they're playing and what you wanted to do or what happened? And she either will or she won't. And then we come to the place where, okay, yeah, I understand. And what would you like to do instead? Which gives her the message, this is reality, respond to it.
Yes.
Not by going back to the past and changing it, punishing anybody. And it's the same with sibling rivalry. I always tell parents, don't take sides. Don't fix the situation. Listen to each one equally and validate whatever happened to them. And then usually the kids resolve it on their own.
Well,
this very short way of saying something that takes me usually a full hour to explain.
Oh, no, I absolutely love your passion. Your passion, your love for this work is exactly what we need. And I absolutely am sure that our listeners have just received so much wisdom and will take it and put it into action, because this information, this work, this knowledge is needed for the future. And I would love for you to also share your free gift with us. And with the audience.
Yeah, I think I just said go on my website, because there are plenty of free videos, interviews, articles. It's all free.
A lot of information, I know, and I absolutely.
All the not very dedicated to make money and more dedicated to making a difference. I do charge for private sessions, but almost everything else is free. There are few products, MP3s and audios, if people still have CDs, and the book that cost money, and the if I work with somebody one-on-one, yes, that I have to be paid, but a lot of it is just free, and I want people to use it to grow. And and for society, it's not, we're in a place in society where we adore victimhood. you know, and we often teach children because we go for that justice thing. That's a whole other conversation we
For
can.
sure. I wish I could have a two-part with you. I can listen and ask questions. I think that we might have to do this again.
All series again, or you can do a series just with me. We can do some classes specifically.
Oh, I would love that. I would love to discuss that.
I think the whole thing about being triggered is taking people the wrong way, where they feel victimized instead of powerful. And again, I don't endorse bullying or mistreatment, but there is a way to deal with it that actually cancels the bullying. If you want me to spend 5 more minutes, I'll tell a very wonderful story. But
I would love that. We are actually wrapping up on our time now. And I actually like this cliffhanger. I love this cliffhanger. That means everybody sign up to read Naomi's work. Work with Naomi, get yourselves ready for pregnancy or parenting, whether you're a man or a woman. This information is needed if you choose to humbly bring in a soul into this planet. Naomi, thank you so much for coming.
thank you.
Really appreciate your presence with us today.
Well, thank you
And
for
we'll be speaking soon, for
Yes.
sure. Part 2 coming very soon. Bye for now, everybody.